Kune. Jeet Kune. What happened? Several people have contacted me and asked me about Jeet Kune over the years. I won't post videos like this unless I have something to offer, and I think in this case I have something to offer. So I'm going to talk about Jeet Kune and really what happened with it. Now, to keep your attention, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to talk about, right? Eventually, right? The video won't be that long, but I'll tell you what I'm going to cover. What Bruce Lee had in mind, what I believe he had in mind, what Jeet Kune is today, and I will, at the end of the video, I'm going to tell you the one thing that Bruce Lee really developed, that he didn't do, the thing that he didn't develop, and that one thing that he did develop is the one major thing we can take away from Jeet Kune. In my personal opinion, Jeet Kune has failed Bruce Lee. It has failed Bruce Lee. That's my opinion. Now, how do I know it has failed Bruce Lee? Well, I was a very young boy, but I was training in the martial arts when Bruce Lee was alive. So I knew the things that he said when he was granting interviews. I know what he had in mind from the interviews that he granted and I read when I was a very young boy and he was still alive. What Jeet Kune is today is at best, dirty boxing, and at worst, kickboxing. That's what it is. Now, there's a few people, one in particular who's going to get bent out of shape, who's a big Jeet Kune fan, has been training Jeet Kune for a very long time, probably from some of his comments, has a high rank in Jeet Kune, at least an advanced rank in Jeet Kune, so I'm sure I'm going to hear from him. But the bottom line is, this is my opinion, it's from my observation, and it's from me knowing what Bruce had in mind according to, which came from his own words. Okay. Again, Jeet Kune at its best today is dirty boxing, right? With some kicks, it's dirty boxing. And it is, at worst, right, it's kickboxing. What did Bruce have in mind? Understand that Bruce Lee intended to make Jeet Kune reflect reality. The violence that was happening during his day. So he started from somewhere. Now it's going to get interesting because most people are not honest about Jeet Kune, and those people who want to be honest about Jeet Kune aren't knowledgeable enough to talk about Jeet Kune, right? Okay, so either they're hiding something, they have an emotional reaction or emotional attachment to not revealing the complete truth, or they don't know what it is. Bruce had to start somewhere in making Jeet Kune more realistic, okay, more reflective of the kind of violent situations that really were happening, right? Okay. So where would he start? Well, he started with one-on-one. He started with one-on-one combat because that's where most martial arts start. How do you deal realistically with one person? What is one person likely to do? How is one person likely to attack you? And then you shape that martial art, or you should, to deal with that situation first. And that's where he was going. This is why he trained in street clothes. This is why many times he's trained in hard shoes, the finger jabs, the 5 ways of attack, this kind of thing. That's where he started. But I truly believe that he intended on taking Jeet Kune as a template and not only dealing with one-on-one, empty hand, but dealing with empty hand versus knife, dealing with knife versus knife, dealing with improvised weapons, dealing with multiple opponents. Now, again, there will be people who say that they train in all those things in a real way, in the way that Bruce intended for people to train in the martial arts, right? In Jeet Kune Do. And in the real way of what he had in mind, I really think they have gone very slow, too slow, in their advancement of Jeet Kune Do, and many people have let him down in not really pushing forward his particular intentions, okay, in their training. All right. So again, what Bruce had in mind was to make it more reflective of the reality of violence, how violence really occurs. Okay. I'm virtually positive from his interviews that eventually he would have created something that was similar to Krav Maga, but perhaps maybe a little more realistic in some ways. I mean, depending on who you train with, Krav Maga is more to less realistic. I think it's a good template. I did a video showing that it's a template, and it's a good template, and any kind of idea that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is more effective or it should be preferred over Krav Maga is idiotic. That said, I believe Bruce was going that way to make Jeet Kune Do a one size or as close to a one size fit all that he could a template, a martial art template could possibly be. And Jeet Kune Do practitioners have failed that. Most of them are still doing that one-on-one, maybe a little bit of knife to knife, which is more like Kali than I think Bruce had intended. Another thing that Bruce would not have done was pursue a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Okay, he would have taken the best arm bars, the most high percentage techniques, and used them. The same way he did with boxing, same way he did with wrestling, same way he did with karate. And yes, Bruce Lee did take some things from karate. There are people who want to deny that, but it's clear, and I have very good sources and reliable sources that told me he did. And in some of his sparring, you can see that he clearly did. Okay, but he took what he needed and put those and assimilated them into his template called Jeet Kune Do. Today you have many Jeet Kune Do instructors, some of the better known ones that are pursuing black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Black belts. When the fact of the matter is, and I've been saying this for many, many years now, at least 10 years I think, right, that the most high percentage techniques in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, right, are taught at purple belt and below. There was a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu who had the courage and the bravery and the honesty to tell me that I was being generous there, that actually the most high percentage submissions are taught at blue belt and below, and not purple belt below and below, as I had previously said, right? So even at an earlier stage, okay? What we find that Bruce would not have done was this pursuit of rank for the sake of rank, okay? Which was something Bruce was totally against. They let Bruce down. What I think he had in mind is not what it is. We also need to understand that Bruce was not a master of Wing Chun. So the idea that his pursuit was to be a master in anything, or that someone who really wanted to copy him or really wanted to find him as an inspiration or use him as a model, well, if you look at Bruce's own practice, right, he was not for trying to be a master per se, when being a master means learning every technique in a particular system. He never went beyond the foundation, the little idea, the first form of Wing Chun. There are some people say he never learned Chun Q, and most people say he did not get as far as BUG. Okay? So he wasn't trying to even master, I don't think, Wing Chun. What he was trying to do, even when he was training in Wing Chun, was to make that reflective of the violence in Hong Kong. Okay? So when we look at that, we need to understand what Bruce Lee had in mind and where Jeet Kune Do is today. Now, when you look at something that people overlook, and I'm going to get, the last thing I'm going to talk about is the one thing that Bruce really perfected that Jeet Kune Do today, for the most part, is good, depending on who you train with, but for the most part, Jeet Kune Do has at its advantage, right? I'm going to get to that in a moment. But I also want to say something about Bruce and how people can really look at him and get something from him. And I will use as a backdrop Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Bruce loved Wing Chun. loved Wing Chun, but at some point, he abandoned that traditional stance. And he took and amongst other things, and he kept from Wing Chun what he thought was functional. There are some people who talk about, well, he's overrated. I don't think he's overrated at all. I'm thinking to some people, and I'll do a complete video. I have one that's a little older, but I'll do an updated video on why I think that Bruce Lee was one of the greatest martial artists that ever lived. And he was not an actor who trained in the martial arts. He was a martial artist, one of the most profound martial artists who happened to be an actor, right? And I think my opinion is one of the best ones because I have no horse in the race. I was training while Bruce Lee was alive. Bruce Lee was never an idol of mine. And people who taught me and my mentors have graced magazines when Bruce Lee was alive and Bruce Lee was not on the cover. My mentors were. But what I want people to take from Bruce Lee is his honesty. Bruce loved Wing Chun. He loved Wing Chun. And I don't think it was easy for him to do so, but he abandoned some things that he thought was not functional from Wing Chun. Bruce had a fight with someone, right? And he was fighting from the traditional Wing Chun stance, right? Using traditional Wing Chun. Now, he ended up winning. He ended up winning that battle, but he felt that he should have overwhelmed that individual much quicker, right? And because he wasn't as impressive to himself as he wanted to be, that's when he really started changing things and tweaking things in Wing Chun and taking certain things out and started really creating Jeet Kune Do, what has become Jeet Kune Do, or what he meant to become Jeet Kune Do, the template that he left before he died. Let's compare that to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It is a fact. It is a fact that the dominant grappling system is wrestling. It is a fact that out of the top 10 all-time, not great, but all-time greatest MMA fighters, out of the top 10, at least 8 to 9, other than Anderson Silva, are wrestlers. At the foundation are wrestlers. It is a fact. It is a fact that NCAA Division I wrestlers usually defeat Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belts. It is a complete fact. 90% of fights end up on the ground. Completely false. Completely false. Usually when someone goes to the ground, they've been knocked out, they've been tripped, they've been thrown, or something like that, or they just fell. And a person does not fall into their guard. Now, you may hang on to a person, you may fall together, but that rarely happens. Look at the hard time they have had facing the facts. Look at the neurosis that they suffer from. And then you compare that to Bruce Lee, a person who had to love Wing Chun, but chose to let many things go. Many things go. Why? Because the onus was being effective and not being loyal to a particular art. Now, let's look at the thing that Bruce Lee developed. The one thing that Bruce Lee developed, depending on who you're training with, you can get from Wing Chun. And that is this, his first attack. Bruce Lee developed a first attack. And his first attack was so vicious and was so devastating, most people, including Dan Inosanto, who admitted it, really didn't know if he even had a good second attack. And this is why when you see people training in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, training in Jeet Kune Do, it's this Pak Sao to a backhand, or it's this straight blast, or it's this it's a stop kick to a BUG, or stop kick to a back fist. It's this first attack, right? It's even if it's a counter, it's this hard counter, this effective counter, but putting combinations together, really good combinations together. Now you will see Jeet Kune Do boxers or Jeet Kune Do fighters throw certain techniques, but there is still an awkwardness. There is still an awkwardness to their finishing methods, right? And the reason is because Bruce really did not develop a great deal of very good finishing combinations. He rarely threw. If you watch him spar, he rarely threw combinations, right? He would throw a punch and then a sweep or something like that, or a punch and then a throw. But very good, crisp, finished combinations is something that is not Jeet Kune Do's forte, because I believe that Bruce first and foremost developed a good first attack, a good good, strong finishing counterattack, or what he thought would be a finishing counterattack. So when you look at Jeet Kune Do today, look at the practitioners. The practitioners are moving around and then they go, and then they go like this, or they do something else. But the 1, 2, 3, 4, elbow, come back, headbutt, throw, stomp. These kind of things you rarely see in Jeet Kune Do. And why? Because they really did not take it further than what they got it from Dan Inosanto. Dan Inosanto didn't take it much further when we talk about really making things realistic. I mean, Dan Inosanto seems to be a very humble man, and when you're a humble man, you're very close to being a good man. But the fact of the matter is that much of what Dan Inosanto teaches, good man that he is, I don't believe is very functional in the street. So in my opinion, he didn't even take Jeet Kune Do and carry it into where I think Bruce wanted it to go. Okay. So when we look at the benefits of JKD, what we look at the first attack. We look at a very strong counterattack, because that's what Bruce Lee developed before he passed. That's what he had done. That's what he had finished. But putting techniques together, again, the straight blast, 1, 2, the elbow, come back with a chop, headbutt, underhook, going to a 2-on-1, throwing, stomping the knee or something like that, right? And then escaping back or something of that nature, right? This good, very good string of devastating techniques Bruce Lee did not develop, and Jeet Kune Do did not develop it either. So, to finish up this video, what happened with JKD? What happened with JKD is the one thing that Bruce didn't want to happen, and that is more idol worship than actually carrying on the tradition that Bruce Lee meant to be carried on. That's one. Two, what happened with JKD? What happened with JKD is they fell for the whole marketing scheme of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Many of them have fell into that, where now the onus is, one of the greatest accomplishments of Jeet Kune Do GKD instructor can have is to get a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. All right. Which means, by the way, that he's taken a whole lot of baggage, a whole lot of fat that really is not functional in the street, and certainly Bruce would not have went for that, right? And then next is, what does Jeet Kune Do have in its favor? What it has in its favor is what Bruce actually ended up having when he left this world, and that is a good first attack, or a very powerful and devastating finishing or supposed finishing counterattack, but very little more, very little after that. And again, what do I mean very little after that? I mean to throw a back fist, an uppercut, elbow, go into a clinch, a headbutt, underhook, over and under, a throw or a reap, and then some kind of stomp or something like that. You rarely see Jeet Kune Do fighters or Jeet Kune Do teachers doing something like that, where there is this finished chain that reflects how fighting really should go, or not fighting should go, but self-defense and self-protection actually should go in eradicating the threat. Okay, so Jeet Kune Do, in my opinion, has failed Bruce Lee. Could be far better. Got caught up in the idol worship in regards to the founder, and also subscribing to many myths involving some of the most popular martial arts. This is Uma Fight Camp. See you next video.